Have you ever wondered why some people can look at the same evidence you see and come to completely different conclusions? Why intelligent, educated individuals can become absolutely convinced of theories that seem obviously false to you? Why your rational friend suddenly starts talking about shadowy organizations controlling world events? Or your colleague becomes certain that major institutions are engaged in elaborate deceptions? You might think these people are simply gullible, poorly educated, or mentally unstable. But the uncomfortable truth is far more complex and disturbing. The human brain didn't evolve to seek truth. It evolved to survive. And sometimes, for psychological reasons buried deep in our evolutionary wiring, believing a comforting lie feels safer than accepting an uncomfortable reality. The psychology behind conspiracy thinking isn't a flaw in certain people's minds. It's a feature of how all human minds work when faced with uncertainty, powerlessness, and existential anxiety. The same cognitive mechanisms that helped our ancestors survive in dangerous environments now make us vulnerable to false beliefs in our complex modern world. Carl Jung, one of the most profound students of human psychology, understood that much of our mental life happens below the threshold of consciousness. We tell ourselves we believe things because of evidence and logic, but often our beliefs are shaped by deeper psychological needs we're not even aware of, the shadow parts of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge, the projections we cast onto the world to avoid dealing with internal conflicts, the archetypal stories we use to make sense of chaos. Today, I'm going to take you on a journey into the hidden psychology of belief. We'll explore why conspiracy theories feel so satisfying to the human brain, how they serve psychological functions that have nothing to do with their truth value, and most importantly, how understanding these mechanisms can help you think more clearly about your own beliefs and the beliefs of others. If you've ever been puzzled by why someone you respect fell into conspiracy thinking, if you've ever noticed your own mind being drawn to simple explanations for complex problems, or if you want to understand how beliefs actually form in the human brain, this video will give you insights that change how you see yourself and others forever. The architecture of meaning. Let's start with a fundamental truth about human psychology that most people never consciously recognize. Your brain is not a truth detection device. It's a pattern recognition and meaning-making machine that will sacrifice accuracy for psychological comfort almost every time. From the moment you're born, your brain is constantly trying to make sense of the overwhelming flood of sensory information hitting your nervous system. It does this by creating patterns, categories, and stories that help you navigate reality efficiently. But efficiency and accuracy are not the same thing. Your brain would rather have a simple wrong explanation than no explanation at all. This is where conspiracy theories derive their psychological power. They don't succeed because they're true. They succeed because they provide what psychologists call cognitive closure, the satisfying feeling that you understand what's happening and why. In a world that often feels random, chaotic, and beyond your control, conspiracy theories offer the comfort of clear explanations and identifiable villains. Jung understood this deeply when he wrote about the human need for meaning. He observed that people would rather live with a meaningful lie than a meaningless truth. When faced with events that seem random or senseless, tragedies, economic collapses, social upheavals, the mind desperately seeks patterns that make these events feel purposeful rather than arbitrary. The conspiracy theory provides that pattern. Instead of accepting that sometimes terrible things happen for complex, interconnected reasons that nobody fully understands or controls, it offers a simpler story. Terrible things happen because powerful people planned them. This transforms chaos into order, randomness into intention, helplessness into potential agency. But there's something even deeper happening here. Jung identified what he called the collective unconscious, shared psychological patterns that exist across all human cultures. One of these patterns is the archetypal story of good versus evil, heroes versus villains, light versus darkness. Conspiracy theories tap into this ancient narrative structure, casting the believer as the hero who has discovered hidden truth, and the alleged conspirators as the dark forces threatening the innocent. This isn't just intellectual curiosity. This is emotional satisfaction. The conspiracy believer gets to experience themselves as the protagonist in an epic story of cosmic significance. They're not just consuming information. They're participating in a heroic narrative where their beliefs matter, where they possess special knowledge, where they're fighting the good fight against overwhelming odds. The neuroscience of secret knowledge. But the appeal of conspiracy theories goes even deeper than storytelling. Recent neuroscience research has revealed why discovering hidden connections feels so addictive to the human brain. When you think you've uncovered a secret pattern or made a novel connection between seemingly unrelated events, your brain releases dopamine, the same neurotransmitter involved in addiction, pleasure, and reward-seeking behavior. This dopamine hit doesn't distinguish between true discoveries and false ones. Your brain rewards you for pattern recognition regardless of whether the pattern actually exists in reality. So, when someone connects random dots and concludes that a secret organization is controlling world events, their brain gives them the same neurochemical reward they would get from solving a genuine puzzle or making a real scientific breakthrough. This creates what researchers call apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random information. The human brain is so good at finding patterns that it finds them even when they're not there. We see faces in clouds, hear voices in static, and detect conspiracies and coincidences. This isn't a bug in human psychology. It's a feature that helped our ancestors survive by detecting potential threats even when the evidence was ambiguous. Better to mistake a shadow for a predator than to mistake a predator for a shadow. Better to assume hostile intent where none exists than to miss actual hostility and become someone's dinner. This better safe than sorry wiring made perfect sense in the ancestral environment where the cost of false positives was much lower than the cost of false negatives. But in our modern information environment, this ancient survival mechanism becomes a liability. We're constantly exposed to vast amounts of data about complex global systems we don't fully understand. Our pattern recognition systems evolved to detect immediate physical threats. Try to make sense of this information using the same logic that helped us avoid predators on the savannah. The result is that we see intentional patterns where there might only be emergent complexity. We detect coordinated malice where there might only be systemic dysfunction. We perceive grand designs where there might only be the accumulated result of millions of individual decisions by people pursuing their own interests without any central coordination. The shadow's projection. Now we need to dive into one of Jung's most profound insights about human psychology, the shadow. This is the part of yourself that you refuse to acknowledge, the aspects of your personality that you've rejected because they conflict with your idealized self-image. The shadow contains not just your negative traits, but any part of yourself that doesn't fit your conscious identity. Here's where this becomes crucial for understanding conspiracy psychology. What you can't accept about yourself, you tend to project onto others. If you can't acknowledge your own capacity for selfishness, you become hypersensitive to selfishness in others. If you can't accept your own desire for power, you start seeing power-hungry manipulators everywhere you look. Conspiracy theories provide a perfect screen for these psychological projections. They create clear external enemies onto whom you can project all the darkness you refuse to see in yourself. The alleged conspirators become repositories for every shadow quality you possess but won't admit. The desire to control others, the willingness to deceive for personal gain, the capacity for cruelty and manipulation. This projection serves a crucial psychological function. It preserves your positive self-image by externalizing everything negative. You get to see yourself as the good person fighting against evil, rather than having to grapple with the uncomfortable reality that you contain both light and shadow, both noble and selfish impulses. But there's an even more subtle dynamic at play. Jung observed that we're often most suspicious of others in areas where we ourselves are capable of deception. The person who is quick to assume others are lying might be someone who lies frequently themselves. The person who sees manipulation everywhere might be someone who uses manipulation but refuses to acknowledge it. This doesn't mean conspiracy believers are necessarily more deceptive than average. It means they might be projecting their own unused potential for deception onto external figures. They're seeing in the world the shadow qualities they possess but have never integrated or acknowledged in themselves. The hero's journey gone wrong. Jung also wrote extensively about archetypes, universal patterns that appear in myths, stories, and individual psychology across all cultures. One of the most powerful archetypes is the hero's journey, the story of an ordinary person who discovers special knowledge, faces great dangers, and ultimately saves their community from a terrible threat. Conspiracy theories follow this archetypal pattern perfectly. The believer starts as an ordinary person living in apparent normalcy. Then they encounter information that reveals a hidden truth. They're living in a world controlled by dark forces. This is the call to adventure that begins every hero's journey. Next comes the phase of gathering allies and collecting evidence. The conspiracy believer seeks out others who share their special knowledge, building communities around their shared understanding of hidden truth. They research obsessively, connecting dots and assembling evidence that supports their worldview. This feels like the hero preparing for battle, gathering weapons and wisdom for the coming confrontation with evil. The psychological satisfaction of this process cannot be overstated. The conspiracy believer gets to experience themselves as the protagonist in the most important story ever told. The story of awakened individuals fighting to expose and defeat a vast system of deception and control. They're not just passive consumers of information. They're active participants in an epic narrative of cosmic significance. But here's where the archetypal pattern becomes dangerous. In healthy heroes' journeys, the hero faces genuine challenges that force growth and self-examination. The hero must confront their own limitations, overcome internal obstacles, and often sacrifice something important to achieve their goal. The journey transforms the hero as much as it transforms the world. In conspiracy psychology, this crucial element is missing. The believer gets to experience themselves as the hero without having to do the difficult inner work that genuine heroism requires. They get the psychological satisfaction of being special and important without having to confront their own shadows, limitations, or mistakes. This creates what psychologists call a grandiose defense, a psychological strategy that protects the ego from feelings of powerlessness and insignificance by creating a fantasy of special importance. The conspiracy believer doesn't have to deal with being an ordinary person in an incredibly complex world they don't fully understand. Instead, they get to be a chosen few who possess secret knowledge that makes them superior to the deceived masses. The comfort of control. Beneath all of these psychological mechanisms lies perhaps the deepest human need of all, the need to feel that someone is in control. Even if that someone is evil, the idea that someone is steering the ship can feel more comforting than the terrifying possibility that no one is in control at all. Jung understood this when he wrote about the collective unconscious and the archetypal patterns that govern human behavior. One of our deepest fears is chaos, the possibility that events happen randomly, that suffering is meaningless, that there's no grand plan or purpose behind the apparent disorder of existence. Conspiracy theories offer protection against this existential anxiety. They suggest that even the most terrible events, wars, pandemics, economic collapses, natural disasters, are actually part of someone's plan. This transforms meaningless suffering into meaningful oppression. It's psychologically easier to believe you're being deliberately harmed by evil people than to accept that you might be suffering for no reason at all. This explains why conspiracy theories often emerge or intensify during periods of social upheaval, uncertainty, and collective trauma. When people feel most powerless and confused, they're most likely to gravitate toward explanations that restore a sense of comprehensible order, even if that order is malevolent. The conspiracy theory doesn't just explain what's happening. It implies that something can be done about it. If powerful people are causing problems through secret plans, then exposing those plans and defeating those people could solve the problems. This offers hope and agency in situations that might otherwise feel hopeless and overwhelming. But this psychological comfort comes at a tremendous cost. By attributing complex systemic problems to the intentional actions of specific groups, conspiracy thinking prevents the kind of nuanced analysis required to address real issues effectively. It replaces the difficult work of understanding interconnected social, economic, and political systems with the simpler task of identifying villains to blame. The echo chamber effect. Modern technology has amplified all of these psychological tendencies in ways Jung could never have predicted. Social media algorithms, designed to maximize engagement, naturally promote content that generates strong emotional responses. Conspiracy theories, with their combination of fear, outrage, and revelation, are perfect engagement generators. But more importantly, digital technology has made it possible for people with shared beliefs to find each other and reinforce those beliefs, regardless of how disconnected they might be from mainstream consensus reality. This creates what researchers call epistemic bubbles, information, environments where certain facts or perspectives are simply absent, and echo chambers, environments where alternative, Voices are actively discredited. In these environments, conspiracy beliefs can evolve and intensify without being challenged by disconfirming evidence or alternative perspectives. The psychological need for meaning and control that initially drew people to conspiracy theories gets reinforced by social validation from like-minded others. Jung would recognize this as a dangerous form of collective psychology, what he called psychic epidemics that can spread through populations when individual, rational thinking gets overwhelmed by emotional contagion and group dynamics. When people's need for belonging combines with their need for meaning and control, they can collectively construct alternate realities that feel more psychologically satisfying than actual reality. This isn't just an intellectual problem. It's an emotional and social problem. People don't abandon conspiracy theories because someone presents them with better evidence. They abandon them when their psychological needs get met in healthier ways, when they find meaning and purpose and community through sources that don't require them to reject inconvenient facts. The integration challenge. So how do we deal with this reality? How do we address the psychological needs that conspiracy theories meet without enabling beliefs that disconnect people from reality and undermine social cohesion? Jung's answer was integration. Instead of simply rejecting or mocking conspiracy thinking, we need to understand what psychological functions it serves and find healthier ways to meet those same needs. This requires acknowledging that the needs themselves, for meaning, for control, for heroic purpose, for community, are legitimate human needs that deserve to be met. The person drawn to conspiracy theories often has genuine insights about real problems. They correctly perceive that powerful interests sometimes act against the common good. They accurately recognize that official narratives sometimes omit important information. They rightfully sense that ordinary people often lack real influence over the systems that shape their lives. The problem isn't their recognition of these realities. The problem is the psychological leap from some powerful people sometimes do bad things in secret to everything that seems random or unfair must be the result of a coordinated conspiracy. Integration means helping people maintain their healthy skepticism toward power while developing more nuanced ways of understanding complexity. It means acknowledging legitimate grievances while pointing out the limitations of conspiracy explanations. It means validating the need for agency and purpose while offering more constructive ways to channel those needs. Most importantly, it means doing the inner work that Jung considered essential for psychological maturity. This includes recognizing your own shadow projections, understanding your own needs for meaning and control, and developing tolerance for uncertainty and complexity. Beyond belief, the ultimate insight here isn't about conspiracy theories specifically. It's about how all human beliefs form and function. Every belief system, including your own, serves psychological functions that have nothing to do with its truth value. Every worldview provides meaning, community, identity, and emotional regulation for the people who hold it. This doesn't mean all beliefs are equally valid or that truth is purely subjective. It means that changing someone's mind requires more than just presenting better information. It requires understanding and addressing the psychological needs that their current beliefs are meeting. If you want to help someone think more clearly about conspiracy theories, start by understanding what those theories are doing for them psychologically. Are they providing meaning in the face of chaos? Community in the face of isolation? Agency in the face of powerlessness? Heroic identity in the face of insignificance? Then ask yourself, how might these legitimate needs be met in ways that don't require rejecting evidence or embracing unfounded theories? How can we create meaning without creating enemies? How can we build community without building walls? How can we offer agency without offering false hope? These are not easy questions, and they don't have simple answers. But they're the right questions to ask if we want to understand why bright, sincere people sometimes believe things that seem obviously false to us. The mirror of psychology. Perhaps most importantly, studying the psychology of conspiracy beliefs can teach us about our own thinking. None of us are immune to the cognitive biases and emotional needs that make conspiracy theories appealing. We all have shadows we project onto others. We all have needs for meaning and control that can distort our perception of reality. The person who believes conspiracy theories isn't a different species of human with defective thinking equipment. They're using the same basic psychological machinery that we all use, just in a context that makes those mechanisms more visible and problematic. This should inspire humility rather than superiority. Instead of asking, how could anyone believe such nonsense? We might ask, what psychological needs am I meeting with my own beliefs? What am I not seeing about my own thinking? Where might my own need for meaning and control be leading me away from truth? Jung taught that the first step toward wisdom is recognizing that you don't know yourself as well as you think you do. Your beliefs about yourself, about others, and about the world are all filtered through psychological needs and biases that operate largely below consciousness. The conspiracy believer might be wrong about the specific theories they embrace, but they might be right about something deeper, that none of us see reality as clearly as we think we do. We're all constructing meaning, projecting shadows, and telling ourselves stories that serve our psychological needs as much as they serve the truth. The difference is that some stories are more helpful than others. Some ways of making meaning are more connected to reality than others. Some forms of community building are more constructive than others. The path forward. If this analysis has shown you anything, it should be that the solution to conspiracy thinking isn't simply better education or more facts. It's addressing the underlying psychological and social conditions that make these theories appealing in the first place. This means creating healthier ways for people to find meaning and purpose. It means building communities that provide belonging without requiring enemies. It means developing institutions that give people genuine agency over their lives. It means acknowledging legitimate grievances about power and inequality while offering constructive ways to address them. Most importantly, it means doing our own inner work. It means recognizing our own shadows, examining our own beliefs, and developing our own tolerance for complexity and uncertainty. It means modeling the kind of thinking we want to see in the world. Curious rather than certain, humble rather than arrogant, open rather than defensive. Jung believed that the problems of the world ultimately reflect the problems within individuals. If we want to live in a world where people think more clearly and believe more wisely, we need to start with ourselves. We need to understand our own psychology, integrate our own shadows, and meet our own needs for meaning and community in healthy ways. The conspiracy believer is holding up a mirror to human psychology. What they show us isn't pretty, but it's real. We all have the capacity for self-deception, projection, and wishful thinking. We all need meaning, community, and agency. We all struggle with uncertainty, complexity, and powerlessness. The question isn't whether you're immune to these psychological forces. The question is whether you'll recognize them in yourself and choose to work with them consciously rather than being controlled by them unconsciously. Your beliefs are not just intellectual positions. They're psychological strategies for managing the challenges of human existence. Make sure your strategies are serving not just your need for comfort, but your commitment to truth. If this video helped you understand something new about yourself or others, let me know in the comments. And remember, the next video explores how to build genuine discernment, the ability to think clearly about complex issues without falling into either naive credulity or cynical dismissal. Because understanding why your brain loves conspiracies is only the first step. The real work is learning to think in ways that serve both your psychological needs and your commitment to truth.